My point is that much smaller universe than what you might face if you're trying to market one particular property. How does it work? At the top, you build your most compelling, strongest factual differentiator for the brand. Our statement was really trying to drive home the size and quality using psychographic demographic information about our audience. And then the rooms and the floors were all laddering into that. And so we had kind of sub rooms again that were super strong factual statements just about the quality of our audience.
Hey, this is Reid, founder and CEO at Digible. And today on another session of Riffing with Reid, I'm going to be picking up where I left off on my voyage, quest, journey, trip, whatever you want to call it, to get 100 multifamily marketing principles out by the end of the year. And knocked out, I think, 19. So this will be 20 through 29. And for this segment or session, this cluster, it's going to be focused more on vendor-client relationships. So I'm not offended by the vendor word. I know some prefer not to use that. So, AKA partners. But ultimately, how do we work better together? So I know it's a pretty constant conversation. Maybe it evolves. I hope it's not devolving, but just in the way that we're thinking about it, the way that we're approaching it. So you never can probably share enough of these best practices because it's so important for both sides to be successful. So using the same format that I've been doing, the start, stop, and continue, we're going to take that approach and going to kick things off here with something that I know is not nomenclature or in the lexicon of this industry, actually comes from media. So it's going to require a little bit of a definition or some context, but hopefully it lands or has some people intrigued and thinking about whether this is something they could do for their portfolio and more so actually at the asset or property level. So number 20, start building your message houses. So what's a message house? Maybe I should have used a property house or something for the industry, but the term message house is something I heard for the first time about 15 years ago when I was in media. So working in radio, TV, and digital, I worked at CBS up in Seattle, and we actually had a political advisor come in and meet with our cluster. And it was at the bequest, I think, of our program director, as well as our general manager, who were together, I guess, talking through how can we be more effective in communicating the differentiators of our brands and also not have it feel so disparate. And it was just something, and for those that don't know and haven't been in the media world, it's pretty common in local media that you will have these kind of stitched together brands that nest under one of the larger media kind of companies. And so it's a very common challenge. And I think there's some relevance or value here in sharing what we learned or I learned from it then and how it might apply now in this industry. But again, the importance or idea of it is how do you create a house of messages that is very easy to market, explicitly gets out your differentiators, and can allow you to start, I'll say, drafting in the market relative to that brand. What I mean by drafting is that when you kind of break up the messaging, just like we'll use NASCAR, I think that was the analogy he used, it slows down. It's confusing. You don't move as fast, and there is a continuity. But the more locked in you can get on what the key messages are and consistently be expressing those through your media, through your website, on site, any possible way that you can communicate the value of the brand, the more that you can actually move faster, draft, and you start to really get those messages out in the market. And, key difference, and I'm just going to acknowledge this, is that when I was up there in Seattle, there was probably 30, radio stations and less than 10 local TV stations. Tons of digital. But my point is that much smaller universe than what you might face if you're trying to market one particular property. A little bit more, comparable if you're marketing the portfolio, meaning at a PMC level, which more and more are doing that. But even if you're just trying to market one property, I think that you can get some hopefully value from this. So how does it work? At the top, instead of a bottoms up approach, it's a tops down. You build your most compelling, strongest factual differentiator for the brand. And what you're trying to establish here is like, out of all the things that we want and could communicate about this particular brand / property, this is what's most important because it is our strongest differentiator. So if you don't, remember anything other than fill in the blank, what would that be? But it can't be I'll say prose or, narrative or squishy. It really has to have some good hard-hitting facts. So it could be, some of the amenities, it could be your location, it could be your price. There's kind of the common cycle, I guess, or menu things that you could incorporate into that. But you should spend the time. This isn't something that you just would quickly move through. And that's where, for me, the fun was in, really debating and pushing each other to say what really is most important. And it's also good to probably validate that on some level after or even kind of during that process of going through this. And then once that's established, you basically are building different floors and rooms that connect to that roof, that roll into that, nest underneath that. And so in media, for us, it was like, we have the largest cume of, this is a little trickier, not the best comparison or use of this, because it was very demographic driven. So obviously there's fair housing rules and don't make any connections there. Just pointing out that our statement was really trying to drive home the size and quality using psychographic demographic information about our audience. And then the rooms and the floors were all laddering into that. And so we had kind of sub rooms again, let's say with rooms and floors, that were super strong factual statements just about the quality of our audience. And then you move over here and it's all about the breadth. And over here was about the ability to engage that audience through various forms of content and on-site and events, etc. And what we practiced over and over as a company was reciting that, and then in different scenarios, how would we connect those or leverage those in the way that we were going to market or communicating. So it's not something that just in hearing this is like, oh, that's simple, I'll just lift that and move that over. But the concept of it, I actually think, is something that you can lift and experiment with and ask yourself about a specific property or your PMC, your portfolio brand. And where would you land? Where would you arrive if you were trying to establish the strongest top line statement that you could, that was factual? And then if you were to build those rooms and floors underneath that and try to ensure that they all stay connected. Once you go through that process, then comes the second, part of the process, which is, okay, now how do we market that? How do we get that consistently out there? Starts with the website, but then obviously the on-site team, and then think about all your marketing and advertising. Is it regularly reinforcing? So if there's any interest, please hit me up, because I know this one is foreign, concept, but something that we at Digible have had success with, and then I think in past lives saw a lot of value from it too. So try it out, try it on for size, and let me know what you think. All right, moving on to things that probably are way more familiar. I would say continue keeping score. So there's, I guess, some clients that live and die by the scorecard that we've worked with, and I always appreciate that. I know how difficult it is to hold vendors accountable. We have our own experience with that. And so one of the easiest things to do, and I'm not saying it's an easy button, but is to quickly establish metrics that are critical for success. It's the age-old question. What does success look like? Well, here's what it looks like when we're using data. And so it's a great kind of jumping off or starting point with a vendor. But I have a few ands or buts to this. And one of the first, and this is just borrowing from one of my favorite authors that I've mentioned too many times probably on the podcast, is Adam Grant. But he just said, when you're building a scorecard, and I think Jim Collins probably said something similar, assume that you're wrong. Go into it thinking like a scientist. that as much as you have experience, you have instincts, and are confident that your scorecard is the scorecard, is right. Try to think, but I'm actually wrong. And it's just a tough mental model to shift. But if you do that, what we've learned, speaking from direct experience, is not necessarily that we're always wrong, but that there might be more valuable metrics that are better at validating or invalidating, whatever those key kind of measurables are. And so, examples, and this is going back to the beginning of time with digital advertising, but there was a point where everybody was saying click-through rate is what matters when it comes to a search campaign or a display campaign, any kind of digital advertising media. And if nobody was willing to rethink that or accept that they might be wrong in the value, then we never would have evolved, to where we are today. And there's just too many examples to share of this when it comes to data, business, KPIs. And so I think you got to get on the right cadence, which to me is probably quarterly, where you're reviewing those scorecards and ideally with the vendor together, collaborating on that and saying, hey, what was our theory when we dropped that KPI? And while it may seem, again, super obvious on the surface, it's like, well, of course, it's lead to lease or it's the number of conversions. If you really follow that all the way through and you know what ultimately the business outcomes you are aiming for, then you might find yourself modifying, similar to a click-through rate, to a conversion rate, to actual leases, etc. That it's a different metric or it's a combination of metrics. And so the importance of this is continue. I think it's super important, so valuable to have a scorecard, to work through it together, though, collaborate on it, and then ultimately review that on a 90-day cadence and kind of look back on what that theory was and then how close did you get to what you were expecting. All right, let's move on to this as kind of a pair, I'll say, related to decision making and empowerment, because I think to varying degrees, again, speaking from my experience, not just at Digible, but over the course of my career and serving clients, that some skew heavily towards empowerment and autonomy, and some not so much. And usually there's something behind that, right? As far as where our clients are on that gradient, meaning what has their experience been within the past, or maybe kind of what are they used to, and to be more specific or explicit about this, it's like some clients will come to us and say, "Hey, here's my budget. It's $5,000 for this month. We're going to put it in your hands. You're the experts. You make the decision. You make the call." And then there's others that say, "Hey, here's $5,000. We're going to put this much in paid search. We're going to put this much, in social, and this much in video, email, et cetera, whatever it is, SEO." And in both cases, that's fine. But what I am advocating for here is to start creating decision filters. So I'll get to the second part here, but this is all about decision making, and I'm going to say in the vein of empowerment with vendors. And this is something we've adopted, and I think are really starting to find some success with here at Digible. But if you're trying to empower or accelerate decision making between you and your vendor, then one of the most valuable things you can do is establish what I'm not going to say I'm calling, because again, this is from some other book. Won't keep dropping too many of these references, but that you establish decision filters. And so just going to share openly with what we've done here at Digible. But for us, with all the different things that we would like to explore, could be doing, the amount of innovation, bottoms up, top down ideas that are flowing through the company, it seemed critical that we had a general kind of rubric in how to prioritize. What does make it through, what doesn't, how do you kind of better vet, and then ultimately with the goal of accelerating. So both fostering more innovation, but also making it a lot more rapid as far as kind of the process to vet and ultimately decide on what to do. So for us, we have revenue, we have gross margin, we have EBITDA. Those are very common business. And for multifamily, you might say NOI, occupancy, things like that. But those are your financial metrics. What else is really important when it comes to prioritizing decisions and ultimately trying to create empowerment? And for Digible, it's reputation, it's culture, and it's business continuity. So when we're initially engaging, as an executive team on, some of the different concepts, initiatives, et cetera, we immediately go there and we just kind of run them through those filters to help us have a better sense of what should we spend more time talking about and which of these don't make as much sense. Very rare that you'll have an idea, a decision that you're going to make that just is super obvious, flies through all, in our case, 6 filters. But it will pretty quickly usually give you kind of a majority and minority, which should be pretty telling, right? I'm trying to encourage or would love to see our clients bring something like that to us so that when we're offering suggestions, ideas, pivoting on strategy, or we're hearing about, some new initiatives, goals from our clients, that we have, some type of rubric or filters that we can quickly work through and just collaborate and ultimately orient around. I think it's very powerful if you're able to establish some type of rubric like that, whatever you want to call it, with your vendors. So the second part of this, staying still on empowerment and speed, but also alignment, as that's one of the more common words that comes up when you're trying to work with a partner, is fixed, free, and flexible. So this is something actually an executive coach shared with me of a model that she had seen work really effectively across a company, where decision making was either too slow or wasn't clear, just as far as ownership, who had authority, I guess, or approval rights, etc. And many of you have probably heard of DACY, and so that's another model. But this is more almost a cultural kind of mindset or framework to decision making that I think is worth sharing and also encouraging our clients or anybody out there to consider when you're working with a partner. But what is fixed, so that would be your non-negotiables. And it's like, under no circumstance can we veer from this. Like, it's an operating code. It's your do's and don'ts, and rather than spew out examples or possibilities, I think those hopefully surface pretty quick for most companies, and if they don't, you got bigger problems as far as what are non-negotiables. And then you move to flexible. And so the flexible are going to be things that you might give a vendor or a partner the latitude, a level of autonomy, but they still need to cover off with you and make sure that you are aligned, that you're aware that this change in strategy, something that might be happening in a reporting call, is signed off on. So pretty easy to follow, right? Fixed, non-negotiables. Flexible is, hey, I'm giving you permission to take the reins on that, but you still need to check in with me before you go ahead and implement. And then the last is free. Pretty probably obvious what that is those are decisions that you actually don't need your partner or vendor to run by you. And that may make a few people uncomfortable, and they may have, on a pie chart, this much, a sliver for free. Ideally, it's the opposite though. And I know that again might make some uncomfortable or just not a model that you have worked within in the past. But truly, I believe, as far as the culture, and I'm going to say between vendor and client, because it is a culture to me, just improves and improves the more freedom and latitude. You are going to get more ownership from your vendor. You're going to get more buy-in. They're going to feel more part of the team, the more trust that you extend. needs to be earned. But the more that you can do that, and instead of a sliver, start broaden that piece of the pie, the faster that you're going to move. And I think the better just the relationship is going to feel versus, God, I always got to have my thumb on them. They feel it, you feel it. It's exhausting. It slows you down. It slows them down. So if you can upfront kind of establish what I was saying on those decision filters or some type of rubric, and then the next step saying, hey, now let's establish what's fixed, non-negotiable, what's flexible, things that I want to give you the autonomy on, but I still need you to check in, and then what's free, and just keep trying to evolve that pie chart to where you see more free and more flexible and less fixed. And I think you'll find a lot more success with your vendors. All right. So moving on, we let's see, quick recap. We have the keeping score, the message houses, the decision filters, the fixed, free, flexible. All right. Stop. This is a stop, being a black box. And anytime I feel like I say stop, I always have to qualify or put an asterisk by this. I am not suggesting that all of our clients or by any stretch, this is the majority of the industry, but I'm still going to stick to my guns here and say this is a stop because it can be so frustrating for partners and vendors when somebody's a black box. And so, most of us know that have been in the business world long enough, especially in leadership positions, how important it is to be able to manage up, manage down, manage, horizontally. So, and it's just really difficult to do that if you're not being vulnerable, if you're not opening up. And when I say being vulnerable, I don't mean talking about your weaknesses or anything like that, but just being willing to talk more about who you are, what kind of makes you tick, what are your energy drains, your frustrations, how to communicate. And it's surprising to me, and I think it's a two-way street. Vendors aren't always comfortable asking for that. They're just trying to play their part, so to speak, and see maybe, pretty clear lines. And that's one of them that they don't want to cross is to delve into that with their client or their customer. But when that does happen, when we do have clients that say, hey, just a heads up, if you don't hear from me, that's a good thing, not a bad thing. That's invaluable. And that's a real example. We often make the assumption, partners and vendors, that if we're not having regular engagement, not seeing a lot of emails, phone calls, getting on Zoom, that something's wrong. But for some of our clients, that is success. So success is not, all this engagement. And we wouldn't know that unless either our clients are sharing that or we're asking and being clear about how to work with you. And so, again, this isn't always the most natural, most comfortable thing in the world, but the more that you can do that, believe me, you will get paid back. It will feel much better, much smoother, and be able to help with understanding, create speed, harmony, et cetera, some of those buzzwords. So things like a read me, an operating manual, sharing your soul values, things like that may sound a little hokey, but I'm a big believer in it. All right, so let's move on to another stop. This one is stirring the pot. I already qualified. But I'm going to find myself doing it again. Not everybody does this, but man, when it happens, it is pretty frustrating. When we have a client that is stirring the pot, meaning really pitting vendors against each other, and I totally get. And I think if I were in the shoes of some of our clients, I would I would lean into this on some level of the competitive, creating competition between vendors. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but there's a point where it actually is unhealthy, and it's just not. It creates uncomfortable feeling and breaks down, in particular, I think, the opportunity to learn, share best practices. And while many, like if you have 5 search vendors or even 2, the competition is real. But if you learn something from one vendor, and you're going to learn plenty over the course of working with different vendors and agencies and all sorts of different classes, and all of that is kept or seen as like, IP and I can't possibly share that with somebody else, aren't you doing more harm in most cases than good? Or if you're willing to share some data, but selectively and not other data. I don't know if these are the best examples, but it's just some of the ones that I've seen. And in negotiating where you're not really accounting for the different unique selling propositions or value propositions of the vendors, and you're just trying to, as much as you can, stir the pot, to see if you can come up with the best outcome. I would just say dial that back a little bit. Be more thoughtful, maybe empathetic, compassionate in how you're approaching that, because I'm not suggesting that some competition isn't healthy. But for those that, are really trying to create almost rivals between your vendors in a certain genre, I'd walk that back. I think that's something that we need to get away from. More alliances, the more people working together, the more everybody wins. All right. So now this one is more about getting to know the company. So I have a few, at least the next two that are pointed this direction. So sharing the family tree, start sharing the family tree. This is pretty simple, but what I mean by that is the key stakeholders in the organization. Instead of that, sometimes being a mystery, or us taking time to get there, and then it comes up several months later, and it's like, hey, this person's really frustrated. This person didn't understand why you guys did that, or why we didn't see this result. Get ahead of that, and instead of kind of waiting for us to onboard the client or you, whoever's listening, think about how can you help. And I'm not saying, again, this doesn't happen, but how can you help accelerate a partner or vendor's understanding of your company? And one of the simplest things to do is share that family tree. Share the organizational design. Here are key players. Here's what makes them tick. Here's what frustrates them. While we have a lot of overlap in success criteria, there are some key things that are unique based on the different people that you see. And the more that you can share that up front, the more we can better manage up and put you in a position to have more productive and valuable conversations with the rest of the stakeholders in your organization. All right. So somewhat similar here. I say share the scripture. So nice to have the organizational chart, important and valuable. But maybe the most important thing is what is the company's vision? What are the core values? What is the BHAG, if you're familiar with that, big, hairy, audacious goal, the mission? Those things are, in many cases, inspiring. It may not seem, if you've been hearing it for a while, that, that's something that a vendor or partner would be interested to know, but I can guarantee you that they do. It makes them feel more part of your company, more bought in, and obviously understanding what the big picture is. And this is just, back to there is a culture that exists. It's not a culture within the vendor or the agency company and then a culture. There's a culture between the two. And this is one of the ways to improve that culture is to talk more openly and share that scripture. So Northern Star, what are my annual goals? The mission, the core values. Tell the story of the founder if you know it. Certainly I know that's been important and valuable for us as we've talked about Digible story. Open that kimono, which something I think I said in the first 10, but that was more about data. All right. Now let's, we got two left here. I would encourage our marketing operating owners, clustering all those, to start requiring more meetings. And this one might sound a little funny, or have some people say, "What am I drinking, smoking? This is just a nice latte, nothing's in it." Because most people have an allergic reaction to meetings, especially I'll say more like the idea of more meetings, not just meetings themselves. But some people, really can't stand being in corporate meetings or company meetings or vendor meetings, and it's understandable. It's like we're all busy. I don't have time for this. Give me the TLDR, give me the bullets. Let's speed this up. And I think I was mostly in that camp until I read a book called Death by Meetings. This one's by Pat Lencioni. I would encourage you to pick it up. Didn't change my entire perspective, but it did change some of my perspective in the way that I thought about meetings. And speaking of TLDRs, the highlight here is that if you think and approach it the right way with meetings, they can be very engaging, compelling. And so one of the key tenets of that is conflict. Embrace conflict, healthy conflict, of course. And then understand what's tactical versus strategic and think about the cadence of those. And then the importance of just the touch base. And while it may end up putting more meetings on your calendar, you'll actually find that the time between meetings, you get more done. You're more likely to execute. You're more effective with the strategy that you landed on or the tactics. So I'm not going to use this as a full plug or try and recap that book, but I really encourage people to rethink the number of meetings that they have with vendors and partners. If you actually increase the volume, but you're really thoughtful about where you land on the agenda, and I would say don't over agenda, don't under agenda, if that's sayable. Then I think you'll have far more interesting topics. You'll be more efficient, and ultimately, what I was saying is you'll end up executing, being more successful in between. And this might show up in daily touch bases. Maybe it's happening. I don't want to suggest over Slack or email because that's not what this is about. But monthly business reviews, QBRs, ABRs, and of course, be engaged. Nothing's harder for a partner or a vendor to set something like this up, more painful, I'll say, and then it's crickets on the other end. Video's not on, there's not really any questions, and just at the end, it's like, thanks, nice job. That's just painful. I mean, put yourself in, imagine being in those shoes. And so if you're going to agree to any meeting, much less more meetings, really, really would love to see people start being, fully present. All right, let's wrap this up with channeling your Kim Scott. So start channeling your Kim Scott. If you don't know who she is, many across the business community do now, but she wrote Radical Candor, which is a best-selling book. So valuable just in the importance of having that radical candor, and in all realms of your relationship. I mean, ideally, whether that's within your family, partner, spouse, kids, but certainly in the business community. And I think between agencies, partners, vendors, and clients, too often we're not on both sides exhibiting radical candor. And I think a lot of that is, it starts with that trust that I mentioned at the beginning. If you don't really get to know each other, it's so hard to get to radical candor. But man, is it powerful and what it can unlock. If you're capable of being honest, but compassionate, empathetic, not overly compassionate, empathetic. Again, I'm not going to use this as a full-on plug for the book or try to rehash all the key points of it. But I will tell you that I think based on what I've heard and sometimes directly experienced, we're not always as honest as we could be about what would make this partnership more successful. And so that could be more autonomy, less autonomy, more direction, less direction, less micromanaging, less second guessing, et cetera. And that feels probably pretty vendor centric, examples. But I'm sure, obviously there's the other side of that. Channel your Kim Scott, and I think you'll find a much more fulfilling, better relationship and better results with your agency, your vendor, your partner. All right. Well, that was kind of a mad dash, but hopefully for those that are tuning in, this gives you a few things to think about, maybe explore, and just ask yourself, how much of these principles am I really living and breathing with my partners in this industry? All right. Stay tuned. Next time we'll be back with, I think that'll be 30 through 39. So hang in there, and we'll be back again shortly. All right. See ya.